This is The Writing Life, and I'm Stephen W. Long. And boy, is this a special day for us. And I think you'll agree when I tell you who came by the studio today. This fella has so many awards and accolades, we can't write or we can't talk about all of them or they'd take up the whole show. But let me give you just a sample here. So this fella's a songwriter and has, well, a singer and musician, and has worked with, among others, Patti LaBelle, Lou Rawls, Elton John, Boz Scaggs, Donna Summer, Nancy Wilson, George Benson, Jimmy Smith, Amy Grant, Neil Diamond, and Kenny Rogers, and that's the short list. Some of the awards. The National Association of Recording Arts and Sciences awarded him Most Valuable Player Peer Award for male background vocals. The Tokyo Music Festival presented him with their Songwriter of the Year Award. Billy Ward, a drummer for Black Sabbath, said he's written and sang on probably 400 hit songs, the later ones with the band Chicago. His organ playing has ranked him on most people's A-list, and he plays the heck out of the guitar as well. He is one of the finest musicians I've ever gotten the privilege to play with. And he's won a couple of Grammy Awards as a songwriter. After that introduction, I feel like I should say welcome to fresh air, but instead I'll say welcome to The Writing Life, Bill Champlin.
Hey.
Yeah, thank you so much for showing up
Well,
today.
thanks for having me, Steve. It's
Yeah.
great.
So
We just flew in.
I was
Boy, our
good.
arms are tired.
Yeah,
right?
boy, your arms are tired.
Of course.
So you have played all over the world.
Yeah.
And as an intro here, what brought you to McMinnville?
Alan Gary is a friend of mine who I ran into when we were playing. It might have been 6 months, maybe 6 to 9 months ago. We played a gig with the Suns at Sacramento, and the next thing you know, I'm hanging out with Alan, and he says, "I want to bring you up for 2 nights in McMinnville." And I said, "Mick, what?
Yeah.
You know, is that a burger or what? You know, what are we talking about?" And of course, I'm just giving him a load, you know. And he just said, "No, I want to try to." He said, "I just want to maybe educate everybody."
Yeah.
You know, because the Suns have been around for a really long time, and we've had, you know, I mean, I do a lot of songwriting for a lot of different situations, but occasionally I get a lyric that goes, "That's a Suns song," you know, it's like I just put it over here. Right. You know, so I mean, we're eventually probably going to actually do another album at some point in the game.
I hope so.
Know? Until we get some more, you know, and once we get a good little bit of songwriting done, you know.
Okay.
And Tim Kaine, the original sax player, is in the band also now.
Great.
He was the original arranger pretty much for the first Loosen Up Naturally album, which a lot of people consider like a Bible for I don't know, for the LSD forward motion of the mid '60s, you know.
Okay. You know, that's why you're here. I want to get into that, but I have to ask. And you were talking about just flying in. Do you still live in Northern California?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I have a lot of friends that got really hurt in the last couple of days.
And that's what I want to talk about.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the girl who introduced me to Alan, who booked these 2 nights, lost her whole house, all her jewelry, all her mom's paintings, and all of the Suns music that she had been archiving since the very beginning. Sure. Which started in 1965. Right. So it's, she's just, we feel so horrible. I mean, Melanie just got tagged really bad. She had to bail out in her nightgown. That fire was moving 6 acres per minute. And it took less than an hour to get from all the way up in the mountains above Napa all the way over to Highway 101 in Sonoma. Right. So it just went boom, like a flamethrower. Right.
And pushed by the wind.
Yeah, and the wind was 50-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah.
Craziness.
Okay, so going back to the early '60s, You were at Tamalpais?
Tamalpais High School in Mill
Yeah.
Valley, California.
Okay. Well, I read something that I want to see if you can verify this is the truth. I read that you had a teacher who said you ought to quit school and pursue music full time. Is that
was
true?
my college teacher.
It was college,
It was,
okay.
it was my theory teacher in college. His name was Larry Snyder. He ended up going, and this was at what we referred to as MIT, which was the Marin Institute of Tomfoolery.
Okay.
College of Marin. Actually,
Right.
Robin Williams went there for a
Okay.
while. We used to run into Robin backstage. This guy's crazy. Anyway, little did we know we were absolutely right. But and then at some point we were taking these classes, and we were, Larry Snyder was a really great musician, a major musician. He said, I want to talk to you and Terry and Tim, the three guys that were kind of doing the band. He put us in a little practice room, and he says, well, I know we're working on, you don't want parallel fifths or anything like that. He sits down and plays me this Bix Beiderbecke stuff on piano. I'm just going, oh my God. He said, this is how I got through college. Was playing all this kind of stuff. And he said, you guys, right now, the music world, the academic music world is just people getting degrees to get a teacher's, to teach somebody else to get a degree, to get a teacher's, and it all stays on the academic side. He said, very rarely does anyone break out like a John Williams or somebody become a really big soundtrack guy or a band member or something. He says, I've seen you guys play. You are so far ahead of what the curve is at the moment. He says, why don't you bail out and just do your band?
Okay.
Besides, you guys are showing up drinking Rainier Ale at your theory classes. And it was just a bunch of jag-off, It was just young kids, and we were, at some level, we were having too much fun.
Now, so is this pre-Sons of Champlin?
This was right when the Sons first started.
Okay.
Because Sons, we had a group called the Opposite Six almost all the way through high school.
I was going to ask you about that.
And what happened with that is that we had the Vietnam War, and the draft was insane.
Right.
So we lost a lot of guys. Not so much to the draft, guys that had actually joined up for 3 years rather than be drafted for 2.
Right.
If you were drafted for 2, you were cannon fodder.
Right.
They'd put you on the front line. If you went in for 3, they'd give you a shot at playing with a band, or doing electronics, or data processing or something. You can find something that was back a little ways and less dangerous. So I mean, most of the guys that I work with, and these are writers of songs I still sing. Rob Moitoza was one. He lives in Seattle, kind of back and forth from Napa and Seattle, and he was a member of the Sons for a little while. Wrote a song called "Imagination's Sake." It's a great songwriter. And but he had to do the same thing. He joined the band, I think. Drummer did the same thing. Everybody did that. So the band just kind of broke up because the draft was really nasty. I went to register for the draft. By then I was already married and had a kid.
Okay.
Because I was married when I was 17. So when I registered for the draft, I was what I think they called it 3S. It was one of the things.
Right.
If I was just married, they'd have taken me. But if I'm married with a kid, that means they're responsible for the kid's medical for the rest of his life.
Okay.
So they ended up blowing it off, and said, "You go home." So we had a lot of asthmatics and polio.
Right.
Guys with
4F.
that had polio, 4Fs, and I mean, they almost drafted Tim, and Tim was he was, I think, 1956. He was the March of Dimes polio poster boy when he was a 6-year-old kid.
Okay. And that's not an exaggeration. That's the truth.
No, that's real. The real thing. There's a picture of him with Anita Ekberg.
Okay. Right.
Here they are, Anita Ekberg.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
So, because our show is about writing, and I honestly, I'm fascinated with songwriting, and then you talked about this lyric sounds like the Sons.
Right.
Is that strictly gut? I mean,
Well,
do you set out and you say, well, I'm gonna write a song that sounds like this, and these people are going to perform it.
Yeah.
I mean, we could get right into your Grammy winners, but what is that? Is it just pure inspiration, or is it workmanlike? And you sit down and say, well, I'm going to grind this thing out.
Well, there's things. I wrote Earth, Wind, and Fire's. I co-wrote Earth, Wind, and Fire's song "After the Love Is Gone."
Right.
And people think that's a really, really, it's a really great pop song.
Yeah.
And then 2 years later, I co-wrote "Turn Your Love Around" for George Benson. Did all the background vocals on it, most of the background vocals, and that was a good pop song. So I was in L.A. at that point of the game, but when I was in San Francisco area or Marin County, what was going on was I mean, we were listening to Sgt. Pepper. We were listening to a lot of really uplifting, spiritually oriented stuff. You know, Dylan was you know, he rewrote the book.
Sure.
Everybody, and then all of a sudden McCartney and Lennon started kicking in, and I'm just looking at it and listening to it, and I'm going, oh, wait a minute, I really liked Wilson Pickett, and I love James Brown. We used to go see him when we were. My first time I saw James Brown was 1963.
Yeah.
You know, in a matinee.
Hardest working man in show business.
Insane band.
Yeah.
And the guys were great. You know, it was just, whoa, just scary.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, most of the average lyric in an R&B song, which feels great, is you know, hey, I'm a man and a half, I'm gonna come with you, baby, and I'm gonna do this and do that. And I was kind of going, whoa, wait a minute. Isn't there a way? And I think I got the same, Sly Stone kind of got the same thing at the same time. I was just like, why don't we just take this really cool, uplifting, spiritual stuff and put it on R&B grooves? So that's kind of how I started writing.
Okay.
And the next thing I knew is like the Loosen Up album, you know, Tim wrote one song on it and I wrote all the rest of them. And that's what this stuff was. People were saying, this album's the best acid guide there is. And I'm just going, well, I don't know about that, but you know, I've listened to a lot of really deep conversations around that sort of explosion in the Bay Area. Yeah. Around mid-60s, 66, 67, in that area. And around that time, I was just writing every day. I had you know, I had a little piano. I was just every single day I was trying to write something. Just like a font. A regular thing. Yeah. I mean, it was, somebody explained it to me in a really interesting way. They said, you know, if you look at the art that has lasted the longest over you know, generations and generations of people that are gone, and the art that lasts the longest is stuff that started off as a craft. You know, so I started approaching music and songwriting as a craft, and if you really get far enough into your craft and give it enough time, eventually it's out of your hands and this thing happens. Right. And that's what was happening to me at that point of the game. Yeah. I was working enough, I was writing enough, that a lot of it was just a craft. I would write 30 songs in a week, but I'd get one good bridge to the song I wrote that I got started with the week before. Right. So I mean, it took a little organizing to make sure one thing was together, but and I just found myself occasionally art would happen, but I don't think you know, I mean, if you look at some of the pottery that they've found buried 6 feet under the ground, so beautiful, and this was somebody that was doing a craft. Yeah, it's where you keep your lentils. You know, right. But look at the thing, so just gorgeous. And I was look at music and songwriting pretty much the same way. Well, I completely agree with you. Now, you've said some things that lead me to ask, do you have formal training? You talked about fifths, I think. About what? The fifths, parallel fifths, isn't that what you said? Yeah, parallel fifths. Yeah. It's just kind of a standard move. If you do parallel fourths or fifths, immediately you're ordering Chinese food somehow. And there's, you know, there's certain things that are going on that when I was in music theory to start with, the very first 8 or 9 pages of the textbook was don't do parallel fifths. Really? But then later on, you know, the rules are made to be broken. Right. You know. That's why when Larry Snyder sat down and played all this Bix Beiderbecke stuff, there's parallel fifths all over the place. But it's done so beautifully, and it was written so well. Yeah. I mean, Bix was a trumpet player, and somebody just recorded him just fooling around on the piano and went, oh my God, this guy's ridiculous. Yeah. You know, he's out of whack. And a piano is tuned differently, isn't it? And the reason I say that, well, I'm gonna blank out here, but songs written on piano, I thought, were different than songs composed on a guitar. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, always. Well, the thing is, it depends on how good you are on piano.
Okay.
I mean, I have a tendency to lean toward pretty crazy chords. You know, I want to find progressions that haven't been played a lot.
Okay.
If you listen to the radio now, I mean, there's a lot of very creative music going on, even with the stuff you kind of don't like, but it's all based on like maybe 5 or 6 different progressions.
Sure.
And it's that same progression over and over again. You do different piano parts against that progression, or different guitar parts, or different overdubs, or horn sections, or something. But I've just found that for me, the thing that I want is I want a new progression. I want new progressions to happen. That's why After the Love Is Gone was so popular, because it was just off the charts. It was David Foster came up with it. It was it was his first hit. I mean, both of us got our first Grammy, then he kept going, you know. I mean, he's amazing musician. But a lot of what makes his stuff really great is that his progressions are a little different than the norm.
I think to some extent, as listeners, we anticipate the next note. Yeah. There's sort of a progression. There's something that sounds right, and yet when you're fooled, when it's not that note, and yet it becomes inevitable.
Yeah.
You think, oh yeah.
Next time you hear it, you can't wait for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a few songs. After the Love Is Gone was one of those. You know, right after something happened along the way. Oh, after the love is gone. And when it goes to that chord, it's just, you know, because there's a common note in it. The chord just goes up from a major 7 to a minor half note up, and starts this other section. So I mean, it was like, wow, this song's got 2 choruses.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I think people just went, this is just such a great thing. You know, and you know, when David Foster and Jay Graydon kind of wrote the progression and put together the basic vibe of it, and David said, hey, I want you to do this on your album. So we were going to do it on my album, and then Maurice White heard it from Earth, Wind & Fire. He says, if you guys will agree to not release it, we'll do it.
Oh boy.
And boom.
Yeah.
You know. So everything is, I mean, for at least in the music business that I've been able to see in the pop world and the records, and back in the days when records were even in business, you know, when there was records going on. Most of the successes, I think, are people stumbling backwards into them. I just, you know, I didn't expect this to happen, but there it is.
Now, are you saying in the writing or in the acceptance?
In the acceptance.
Okay.
You know, I mean, David Foster happened to be in New York City. He was producing a Hall & Oates record, Along the Red Ledge, when this Earth, Wind & Fire already had that record out. And he went over to CBS every morning and knocked on doors and said, this should be a single. This should be, and they said, no, it's a boogie dance band. Yeah, they don't do ballads. It's not happening. Don't do that. And finally, I think they put it out as a single just to get Foster out of their face. And bam, the thing took off like a shot.
Yeah.
You know, we came within, I think, 30 or 40 votes of being Song of the Year that year. But that was the same year Michael and Kenny wrote What a Fool Believes for the movies. Hard to beat that one.
Yeah. But now you did get Song of the Year, R&B Song of the Year.
R&B Song of the Year.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of years in a row. I figured it'd just happen every couple of years. I was wrong.
It ain't that easy, is it?
No, it ain't that easy.
Yeah.
With somebody, it was like somebody said, hey man, it's lonely in the top 10. There's only 9 other guys up there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I mean, you ask almost anybody that's in the top 10 at any given time, you find some point in there where just some fluke happened, some luck thing happened, or some promo guy did something really weird.
We've talked about that.
Yeah.
It may be universal, but certainly in the arts, whatever your art is, I think that there's you have to be competent.
Yeah.
And the next step up, I think, is a great deal of good fortune.
Well, say for instance, you've got a number 5 record on the charts. There's probably 50 other records released the day yours was that are just as deserving.
Right.
And it's just, who knows? I mean, it's divine intervention at some level. Yeah. I don't know. I don't. You know, nobody's been able to actually explain it.
Right.
I mean, people go, "Hey, man, I got a formula." Yeah, I mean, I've heard of people having formulas of winning at blackjack.
Oh, sure.
It doesn't work.
They don't build the casinos on you winning.
No, not at all.
So,
believe me, I've been in those places for weeks at a time.
Yeah.
Oh,
Cleaned them out?
Huh?
Did you clean them out?
No, I lost a lot of quarters because I go to the kids
Yeah.
to the kids arcade and play pinball.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And and if I'm going to do anything at all,
Yeah.
most of the time I try to get out of the building because the noises drive me stark raving crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All the
Yeah, and the lights.
You come off the elevator to go get a coffee in the morning, and it's like, oh,
Don't do that.
no, it's not a good thing.
I had read one time that I think it was ABBA's manager was responding to a comment that ABBA had a formula. And he says, well, if it's a formula, you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again,
Somebody
it's not that
told
easy.
me. Somebody told me a story. This is just rambling like crazy, which you'll find I do a lot. That's how you write good songs. You
Absolutely.
just ramble until something just grabs
Yeah.
you. But Chet Atkins was playing in a studio gig, and this kind of a new engineer in town, when he had his Gretsch Country Gentleman, his beautiful guitar that he played. And the guy came over to him after one take. He said, "Man, that guitar sounds good." I said, "Well, thank you." And then after the next take, he go, "Man, that guitar sounds really good." After about 3 or 4 of the guys saying that both times, Chet put it on the stand, looked at the guy and says, "How's it sound now?"
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. It might have been Arnold Palmer, but one of them made a good shot, and the guy says, "Man, you're lucky." And he says, "I am, and the harder I practice, the luckier I get."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I met him right before he passed away. He's a really sweet guy.
Oh, boy.
Nice guy.
So you started in San Francisco in the 60s.
Yeah, in the Bay Area, basically. I was
Bay
in Marin
Area.
County. We were the guys that grew up in Marin County.
Okay.
Us and Huey and the News. are
Really?
Really kind of the only guys that grew up in Marin. All the rest of the, the
And what
Dead.
about the Airplane?
The
No?
Dead. Well, Quicksilver, John Cipollina grew up in Mill
Okay.
Valley. I mean, I was a friend of his, way early when I was
Okay.
freshman in high school. But for the most part, the bands were based out of Haight-Ashbury and stuff, like the Dead and the Airplane and,
Right.
and Quicksilver and Great Society and actually, I think one of the first bands to move to Marin County was Big Brother and the Holding Company.
From what, Southern California?
No, from San Francisco, just across
Oh,
the bay.
okay, all right.
And then at some point of the game, just about every band that makes it out of San Francisco, eventually, once they get the money, they can move to Marin, because Marin's expensive.
Yeah.
It's a pretty penny
You think
over
San
there.
Francisco's expensive? That's
Oh,
well,
San
now
Francisco.
it's-
Well, at this point of the game, the whole place
Right.
is the whole place.
I think George Lucas lives up there, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. He put ILM and all of his other stuff, Lucasfilms,
Right.
out a little ways on this road going out to West Marin, but it was Lucas Valley Road, and it was called Lucas Valley Road years before George was even
Really?
born.
Just coincidental?
It was just coincidental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm so fascinated by the opposite sex. Was it just a high school garage band? It sounds like
a little
more than
a
that.
garage band.
Yeah.
We did covers and everything, but we had a couple of saxes.
Okay.
We had a few saxes. We were using organ.
Really?
We were doing, anything like Tobacco Road by Lou Rawls.
Okay.
We were doing, and I was really attempting to be the singer that I eventually became
Yeah.
at some level, as I really wanted to sing R&B. And really, for me, more than anything else, as a singer, once Stax Volt started, then you had Otis, Otis Redding,
Right.
and you had a lot of really cool singers coming out of that world. Wilson Pickett was kind of based out of that world, Muscle
Okay.
Shoals and Stax Volt and that whole.
Yeah.
I was aware of Motown. I dug Motown a lot, but the minute they got that giant hit off the Supremes, like "Baby, Baby,"
Yeah.
it was just this thing, and then everything on Motown started doing that
Right.
for a long time, and I think that opened the door to Stax Volt coming in with that really great groove. And what was cool about Stax Volt is everything they did was half white and half black.
Okay.
Booker T and the MGs.
Yeah.
They played on every single one of those records.
Uh-huh.
Those guys, and I think after Martin Luther King was assassinated, the white people were pretty much thrown out of their own record company. And that was,
Yeah.
it was great when it was sitting right there.
You
So, I
get-
mean,
you
Steve
get the
Cropper.
mix, yeah.
Steve Cropper's a good friend of mine. And he's just a sweetie pie. And he had, first of all, as a guitar player, he played the coolest, craziest stuff. I mean, great rhythm parts. One of the best rhythm guitar players, I think, in the world. And he came up with such cool things. I mean, it's all basically the same stuff that the Blues Brothers did 20 years later. You know? And Steve was playing it there, too,
Yeah.
playing the same parts. And, you know, Steve and Duck were the white guys in the band, and Al was on the drums, and
Right.
Booker was on the organ. And it was just a really cool combination of people doing, you know, working, you know, they'd go to work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, just like you and me or anybody else.
Yeah.
And
And
just
that's kind of
worked
like
in
the
studio.
craft you're talking about.
They were
Yeah.
dealing with the craft,
Right.
and then along at that same period of time, while that whole scene was going, Al Green started coming out.
Okay.
And he was like across town playing on High Records with I can't remember who was producers. Willie Mitchell was producer. He was a great guitar player at one time, and they did those kind of records. They used the same guys, you know. And the things were really, really cool then, because there was this forward motion. And man, you know, I remember where I was, what time of day it was.
Oh, sure.
The first time I heard Otis Redding, I went, "What is
Yeah.
this? I gotta find out what this guy's about."
So you
know.
talked about Muscle Shoals and really a variety of music.
Yeah.
Now, is that where the Swampers come from?
Muscle Shoals, I'm not sure. I know Aretha. They say that she did her first
Well,
Atlantic
I think that
album
is the Swampers, yeah.
at Muscle Shoals, and that was with all the guys that were playing on it. Were the, you know, Roger Hawkins was the drummer. I always thought, I was listening to Roger on his Wilson Pickett records, and I could just picture this like about a 6'4" black guy that was, you know, was just killing it, and he's overweight white guy, been playing country all his life.
That's funny.
And they put him on R&B, and he just, you know.
Well, that's so. What I'm thinking of with all of that, and that's not a crossover, but being able to transition into that other thing. I was talking with my friend Frank, who's in the studio here, about you coming and about your style and how your style has sort of morphed over the years, I think. And so Sons of Champlin, and just take this as the compliment, I mean it. Do you have any sense that Creedence Clearwater maybe borrowed from you? And because you were really first with...
Well, we top billed them a couple times. Actually, we played a gig at Stanford.
Okay.
Outdoors at Stanford one time, and Creedence Clearwater they didn't open for us because another band opened. There were 3 bands, and they were the second band, and we were the closing band. So we were kind of hot at the moment, you know, or at least lukewarm at some level. But I think John originally came from Memphis.
Did he? I just assumed it was Lodi.
Well, yeah, but at some level, I think he was just, if he didn't come from there, he was paying really close attention to what was going on.
Okay.
There. And he just, you know, he had the really right amount of rock and roll and like Delta stuff.
Okay.
And kind of put it together. And even at that point, I was already a little slicker. You know, I was already kind of digging some jazz stuff into everything. And so, I mean, John was always, and still is, just so great. He's just a monster, but he's got it from that. He's still got that kind of Delta thing going on. That's why Proud Mary was such a cool piece of music. You know, and think of the grooves on some of those records. You know, Fortunate Son was just an amazing pocket. And that's I think that's the drummer and bass player in that band had a lot of stuff going on that you know, nobody ever talks about. They always just talk about John and John's guitar playing. Man, there was some major stuff going on. Rhythm guitar player was great, but Born on the Bayou, Born on the Bayou, groove for days. You know, I mean, you don't hear that all that often.
Yeah.
Just and that's right away I just went, well, these guys are so popular, I hate them. and then going, well, let's get past that and listen to what they're doing. There's a reason they're popular.
Yeah.
You know, and we were always, I mean, I always had a funny saying is that, you know, the Sun's career was basically every time opportunity knocked, we answered the phone. You know, I mean, we missed more opportunities because we were busy smoking dope all the time.
All right, so we're going to run out of time, but I got to ask you.
Yeah.
You had enormous success with Chicago. Any comment about those days?
Well, it was fun, you know. I mean, it all started. You know, a friend of mine was a guy named Angelo, whose ex-wife had married Danny Serafin.
Oh.
And Danny was producing Angelo's record. I had done some playing and some backgrounds on Angelo's last record, which was about 3 years before. So he called me out of nowhere. I was in the middle of doing Lee Ritenour's record. Another song, Is It You, by Ritenour, was one I did all the backgrounds and co-wrote, which is a pretty big hit for Lee. But I was doing that album with Lee, and I'd come home really late, and he called me about 9 in the morning and says, "Can I get you to come sing backgrounds?" And I just lied to him. I said, "Man, I got a really bad cold. You don't want to hear me." And he says, "You know, Pete said the same thing." And I said, "Pete?" He said, "Yeah, Pete Cetera."
Yeah.
I said, "Peter Cetera's doing the date?" He said, "Yeah, even though he had a cold." I said, "Yeah, I want to sing with him." So I went to the date and everything like that. And then when Peter, you know, they had this one song, I said, "Let's do kind of a Rolling Stones, We Love You, kind of hard voice, burn fifth kind of hard thing, you know, I mean, rock thing, you know, and try to make that really work." We went to the microphone. Everybody in the booth just went when they heard the blend.
Yeah.
And man, I was in that band like that. So that first 3 years with Peter, you know, we did 16, which was great, kind of opened the door. But Hard to Say I'm Sorry was on 16. That was a big hit. Everybody thought it was on 17, but it was on 16. And then 17 came and boom.
Yeah.
You know, Hard Habit to Break, Stay the Night, You're the Inspiration. Big wedding song. I mean, and a lot of it was Peter and David really hit a great stride writing.
Yeah.
They wrote some great stuff.
Would it be accurate to say that's more of a big band sound, or did you look at it like that?
That record was starting to focus because of videos and everything else that was going on at that time. It wasn't all about the band and the horns and the this and the that. It was getting to be more about Peter.
Okay.
You know, Peter had lost a lot of weight. He was looking great. He was singing great. It was happening. And the record company was going, if you get the right kind of ballads, they'd all, you know, because of If You Leave Me Now, a couple of records earlier, had really opened the door to the ballad land is going to happen. So, I mean, at this stage of the game, and I think from then on in, the record companies said, we don't care about your rock and roll. We want the ballads.
Yeah. I heard that because ballads are so emotional, that radio stations had a tendency to stay away from them, obviously not in that case, but because people really like it or really don't, they wanted something that was more bland, and the purpose of the record selection was just don't change the channel. Even if you don't really love it, don't change the channel. Where with a ballad, again, because you're emotionally invested, it may...
Unless you're catching David Foster on this rise.
Well, right.
And David did such good work. Like, for instance, take the song Hard Habit to Break. It's kind of a duet with me and Peter. It's Foster's, there's sections of the thing where Foster just let it fly. And to this day, it's just one of the coolest pieces of music ever. Yeah. I love playing it, no matter who I'm playing it with. Good. You know, I mean, we go out, you know, the Suns is one thing. You know, I don't even do any Chicago songs with them. Okay. I don't do my hits. Yeah. I do Sun songs. That's what's going on with the Suns. That's what we're bringing to the ball game. Yeah. And that's what people are, I mean, just lately, the last couple of years, people are going, this is fun. We're having fun. So the Suns had a lot of real dig me music, you know, a lot of, you know, time signature stuff, crazy stuff going on. And it was like, at some point of the game, just in this last round, I'm just kind of going, let's get our more simple stuff, the straight ahead simple stuff, and let's not try to play over the audience's head. Let's just play right to here. And am I right that that's how you started? That's the earlier. Yeah. So, and we got caught up in trying to show everybody like what great musicians we were, and you know what? Nobody cares anymore. what you want to do with an audience, at least what the Sons are doing at this point, and it's catching on. In a weird sort of way, it's catching on. I mean, there's a lot of bands from the 60s trying to keep it alive, trying to make it move. And you're hearing, you're hearing some of the same songs, you're hearing some of the same stuff, but very few of them are like doing new shit. Excuse the expression. You know, doing new stuff. I mean, we have a tendency to put together some new stuff. Yeah. And, you know, I like to pass the ball around. My wife's singing with us. Carmen Grillo on guitar. Carmen played 9 or 10 years with Tower of Power. So you think he plays any rhythm? Yeah, I'd say so. I guess, yeah. And I've known Carmen forever. He was the best man at Tamara and my wedding, and that's almost 36 years ago. Right. So I've known him since he was a 19-year-old kid. He's a monstrous guitar player. Yeah. Great guitar player and a sickeningly great singer. So when him and me and Tamara are singing together, the Sons, you know, we're never known for our vocals, but they've kicked butt these days because we got 3 singers that are just, you know. Right. I mean, for a long time I had really one singer on the stage with me, and it was Jim Preston, the drummer, and Jim passed away in 2014 with melanoma. He just took him out like that. So, and at that point in the game, I'd already had Carmen in the band. We already started doing it, and at some point I just said, let's put Tamara in the band, and we'll have 3 singers that just so when we do 3-part stuff, it's just smoking. Because I mean, when I moved to LA to do solo records, we kind of had to wait because, you know, a lot of times I'd have to wait for Foster because he was doing the Tubes. Right. He was doing the Tubes first album, the backwards completion or the completion backwards or whatever. Crazy. It had She's a Beauty on it and Talk to You Later and everything. He brought me in as a vocal ringer for that, so I kind of ended up singing on a lot of that stuff. But I had to kind of wait to do my album. So, and during that period of time, while I was doing it, I was just trying to make the rent, and I ended up getting a lot of background vocal dates. Right. And a lot of it was at the time when everybody was going, well, we need cool arrangements. So I'm primarily a vocal arranger. Not that I didn't set out to do that, but it's like one of those things, like I was saying earlier, you sometimes just stumble into something. Sure. And the next thing I know, I'm actually arranging some pretty decent backgrounds. I mean, kind of put together the backgrounds for Little Genie, for Elton John, and a handful of Donna Summer things.
Goodness sakes.
Yeah. Yeah. It was me and Nigel and Dee and Max Carl. And Max is the lead singer for Grand Funk Railroad. Yeah. Great singer, great keyboard player. Yeah. He's just too tall, though. Big problem. Way too tall. All right. But you know, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that was at some point of the game. There was really an industry town. It was like you could get, you know, I mean, I had a break 1 week where I went and did a duet with Jill Carlucci on a version of Dancing in the Streets, and it was for ABC Network. Okay. Great. You know, and 3 days later, somebody said, "Hey, you want to come sing on In the Heat of the Night for the Archie Bunker, for the Carol O'Connor TV show?" Right. Well, I sang it, and you know, Mike Finnegan had sung it, and Leslie Smith, and all these great singers had taken a shot at it, and I said, well, you know, I'll go give it a try, see what happens. Thing's been on the air for 35 years.
And you've used it, yeah.
I sing every night. That's probably my biggest hit. I mean, it's played in more living rooms than most of my records, that's for sure. Boy. You know, even the Chicago's manager didn't even know I'd done that. Huh. He had no idea, you know. It was pretty funny. He's like, and whose manager are you? Yeah. Okay, great.
Well, Bill, we've been out of time for some minutes here, but before we shut down, mention this one more time, just because I know that's why you're in town.
We're playing, and I forgot where we're playing. The
fairgrounds.
The Yamhill County Fairgrounds.
Right.
We Three's playing there, and everybody tells me those guys are really kicking. Guys. Those guys and girl are really kicking. My son Will's going to open for us. Right. And Will tear you up. He's a major piece of work. He's going to use a loop pedal and just kind of do that, and just play by himself. Yeah. But I mean, he's become an amazing musician in his old age. I mean, he's a Berkeley grad. He's got a BA in music.
He had a pretty good teacher.
Well, no, I was never his teacher, but I got him with guys that were. Yeah. You know, he'd come home from high school and look in the living room, and Jeff Porcaro's setting up his drums to do a demo.
Yeah.
Or Luis Conte was setting up all these congas and stuff, and you know, you walk in the other room and there's the Manhattan Transfer singing on a microphone. 'Cause I had a studio in my house. He grew up with a 24-track studio.
Yeah.
So I mean, all of that stuff was really great. And then at some point, I got him with a really great piano teacher, and he just,
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
took off
some
like
of
a
that's
shot.
innate. You got to be born with it.
Well, there, you know, he says, "Man, I don't want to hear this apple falling too far from the
Right.
tree." I said, "Well, you know, I don't want to hear you riding your kid's coattails either." You know.
Sure.
But he actually got on The Voice, the TV show The Voice,
Really?
and we became a finalist on The
Yeah.
Voice. They gave him a car. What can you say?
What can you say?
You know, he came in number 3.
Yeah.
The finalists, there are 3 finalists. So,
Well,
but he did pretty well. I mean, he scared
No,
everybody.
that's terrific.
Stayed with it, and,
Yeah.
and that wasn't part of their plan. He was the spoiler. It was the season 5, I think.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, Bill Champlin, we got to leave it, but man, what a pleasure. What
Thanks
a
for
pleasure.
having me, and let's put McMinnville on the map.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's what Alan wants to do. He said, I want to put McMinnville on the map.
Yeah,
He lives here.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I said, well, you know, you probably have better luck if you played, you know, if we played this through a gig in Portland or something.
Yeah.
He says, well, no, I want to do it in McMinnville.
I had a chance to interview Alan a couple of times ago.
Yeah.
And what a great interview.
Yeah.
He's a terrific guy.
He's a nut. I mean, he's out of his mind, just like me, just like all the rest
Yeah.
of the guys that we all hang out with. He's just, I love him, man.
Me too.
Crazy as a junkyard dog, but I love junkyard dogs. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? There's something. I think it was Little Feat at one point was going out and they had a gig in all these different cities, and their fans were promoting the gig. You know, it wasn't Live Nation
Right.
or AEG or any of these big corporations.
Ah.
It was their fans, you know, renting a hall, putting the, you know, getting the back
Really?
line, putting all the stuff up, and boom, packing it.
Yeah, great.
You know, because it's Little Feat. You know, I mean, if that's one of the bands. Them, Steely Dan, Toto, Earth, Wind and Fire. There's a handful of bands that should be on a government grant. I mean, unbelievably great music.
Sure.
And Little Feat's one of those.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Oh my gosh, great. Folks, that's The Writing Life. We'll probably never top this, but thanks for joining us. I'm Stephen W. Long. You can contact me through my website, stephenwlong.com, and we'll just see you next time on The Writing Life.